I hereby call to order the Village of Riverside Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting for Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. And could you please call the roll?
Of course. Commissioner Clarkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Yes, here.
Here.
Commissioner Braun?
Here.
Chairperson Hennigan?
Here. We have a quorum. First up is approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting minutes of December 17th, 2024. Is there a motion?
So moved. To approve the minutes?
Is there a second?
I just have a change.
Yes,
Can I
please.
second a motion to approve, but
Yeah, we'll do the
subject to-
second and then do the discussion.
Okay, I second.
All right. Anyone have any changes?
I just had there was an added word at paragraph 8. Let's see, page 8 of the document package. Commissioner Braun asked if that first "new" in the sentence should be stricken.
Oh, in section, I'm sorry, which number? On page 8?
It's on page 8 of the
Oh,
agenda
page 8 of the
package.
packet. I'm sorry. I thought it was page 8 of the minutes. And we're in section,
Section 8.
okay.
It's at the top of the page.
Okay.
Commissioner Braun asked that first "new" should be
Oh,
stricken.
that's correct. Thank you. It is not meant to be there.
All right, any additional changes? All right, and could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Clarkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Aye.
Commissioner Braun?
Aye.
Chairperson Hennigan?
Aye. Motion is approved. Is there anyone present who would like to speak during this time about an item that is not on the agenda? All right, seeing no one, we will move on to the liaison report.
Yes. We have two updates. On January 16th, the village board approved the final plans for the planned unit development at 28 to 30 East Burlington Street. That's the proposed multi-use building with 2 live-work units on the ground floor and residential units above. The applicant has 180 days from that date, which would be July 15th, to combine the properties in a subdivision application and to obtain the building permits and start construction. The village board can grant one extension of that by an additional 180 days, but that should give you a time frame for the project. The second update is that the Preservation Commission will review the surface coverage text amendments on February 13th. And their recommendation, along with the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation, will be forwarded and presented to the board with an ordinance on February 20th.
All right, thank you very much. That brings us to old business, discussion regarding text amendments for front-loaded garages.
Thank you. Following the Commission's discussion on December 17th, staff drafted amendments to the standards for garages and driveway widths, which was included in your packet. I'm requesting your feedback on the proposed text amendments and the direction on 3 topics the Commission previously discussed, which are listed here in the memo. 1, whether the garage door width standard should be amended. 2, what the driveway width standard should be for detached front-loaded garages on corner lots. And 3, whether bonus building coverage should be used to encourage the construction of detached garages instead of attached front-loaded garages. So starting with an overview of the styles of garages that we found within the village, and provided some photos to make sure that we're using the same terms and terminology. And generally, in preparing these amendments, I used the rule of thumb that we discussed last time, which is a front-loaded garage is accessed, whether it is attached or detached, directly from the street that serves the vehicle, meaning that there's no curve to the driveway and it goes straight into either a detached garage or an attached garage. So here we have an example of an attached front-loaded garage, and it's important to note, because there are some differences, that this is on an interior lot instead of a corner lot. So here we have, as suggested by Commissioner
That's
Clarkson,
my house.
an attached front-loaded garage on a corner lot. So in this, you can see this is one street, I'm standing on another street, and here is the view. So again, it's front-loaded even though it's behind the house. So moving on here, we have an attached side-loaded garage. So it's attached to the main residence here, but you have to turn to move into and go into the house. And we'll take a look at the definitions of these in a second. We have an attached alley-loaded garage. Now this is a view from the alley. I'm not sure that there are very many of these garages. I was able to find one that I could take a photograph of. This is, I believe, Kent Road, and an alley connecting with Kent Road, and this is an attached garage. I believe this is a detached front-loaded garage. It's in front of the primary structure. I did find a few examples of these. There are some that are within the street yard, which would be prohibited currently in the code. So just as a reminder, the street yard is area between the point of the foundation of the house that's closest to the street and the yard. So that entire area is the street yard. Accessory buildings can't be in that area. In fact, they should be behind the primary structure per the code. And here we have a detached front-loaded garage. Again, it's an interior lot, but you can see it is accessed straight back from the street. And here we have a detached front-loaded garage on a corner lot. So again, you can see the street here. The primary entrance to the house is off of this street, and you'd have to turn the corner, and this garage is in fact detached from the main structure, even though it's quite close. And finally, a detached side-loaded garage. I was only able to find one, but I did find it. So you access this by driving down the driveway and then turning and entering the detached garage there. So for what it's worth, I think that establishes some good standards for us. I've seen one rear-loaded garage during a compliance inspection. So that would be where, in this case, if you imagine driving around the house and the garage was, you turned, did kind of a U-turn, and then the garage was attached to the house. I didn't take a photo just because that would involve going on someone's property to take a photo of the garage, so I didn't do that. Also, and I'm sure many of you are familiar in this area with a detached alley-loaded garage. Very, very common. And I didn't take a photo of that just because it's not meaningful to show that you can't see the garage in relation to the house. But so those are the types of garages that I was able to identify within the village, and I use that to develop potential definitions of garages. Generally, these fall into two types of categories. They're attached or detached, and then we have the orientation to either the street or the alley. So we've got alley-loaded, front-loaded, side-loaded, and rear-loaded. And using that, I developed some proposed definitions. So existing in our definition section of the code, we already have definitions of attached and detached structure. So I don't think we necessarily need to call those out individually in each type of definition of a garage. But we did divide up garage alley-loaded. So we specify here that could be attached or detached, which we just saw, in which vehicular access is provided via an alley. That seems fairly straightforward. Front-loaded garage. So we have attached or detached accessory structure with a door or doors that are generally parallel to the street that provides vehicular access. So that allows for some variation in the drive, but ultimately that's how the garage is oriented. Side-loaded, the door or doors are generally perpendicular to the street that provides access. And then rear-loaded, with this specifically is an attached accessory structure with a door that's on the rear facade of the primary structure. I think that these definitions, when you consider the fact of what we've seen as possibilities in the village, capture the different types that we have. One important note is that one of our discussion points during the last meeting was about garages in side yards. So there is a general, I think, colloquial term for a side yard, which is the yard beside my house. I think people would generally use that term. And then there's the specific zoning definition, which is a very small area. It's 10% of the lot width or 5 feet, whichever is greater. So a minimum of 5 feet could be, if you have a 100-foot lot, it could be up to 10 feet, but a limited area right on the property line that you share with a different property. So in looking at the 2018 amendments, I think that they were using side-loaded garages to refer to garages that are detached from the primary structure, or maybe attached to the primary structure, but located on a corner lot. So that's to the side of the lot, or to the side of the primary structure. That's what I've taken from what I can gather from the proposed amendment. So I think that provides a little bit of clarity when we look at some of the amendments moving forward. But because I wasn't able to find any examples on interior lots of a garage next to a house, in my mind, they're there, but they're on corner lots. That's a distinction. So I think we've covered in these definitions the different types of garages that we'll encounter, and then we can provide standards for them. Okay. In looking at the proposed amendments, we start with removing the requirement that an accessory building be located a minimum of 10 feet from the principal building. The commission was in favor of that, and so that only requires simply striking that language from the ordinance. And we'll move in here. I'm going to refer back to the memo to keep us on track here. I wanted to review garage door widths. So this is something that the commission discussed, but we didn't get a clear consensus during the last meeting, and I want to revisit it now that we have these different types of garages and see what your opinion is about limiting garage door widths. So again, the purpose of this would be to limit the visual mass of a garage that's visible from the street. That was, I think, the initial 2018 purpose of proposing these changes. So for example, in our definition of side-loaded, I think it's slightly different than the old definition of side-loaded, which is, I think, why they were recommending 9 feet. So I think in 2018, they were envisioning a side-loaded garage as that detached garage, or that front-loaded garage on a corner lot. And I think because it was front-loaded, they wanted to limit those garage doors to 9 feet in width to be consistent with the front-loaded garage that's called out currently in the code as being 9 feet in width.
Should we, if that was the original intention of the 2018 committee, should we perhaps say side-loaded garages on corner lots for 9 feet?
Sure.
As opposed to, I could understand why a side-loaded garage on a corner lot perhaps should be limited to 9 feet per door. But if there is a home that has a side-loaded garage that is not facing the street or a street, I don't think that there should be that restriction.
I wasn't suggesting that either way is right. What I'd like to do is just gauge your reaction now that we are looking at these different types of garages. So if we're defining side-loaded garage, if we're in agreement that that's a good definition for that type of garage, and the doors will always be perpendicular to the street, then I think it's up to the commission to determine if they think that 18 feet is too wide and it should be limited to 9.
Are we discussing this now, or?
I'd like to.
Me
If I can
too.
get your, yes, please.
Before I forget.
If I could get your input, I would love it.
So there was one of the garages, I think it's on Blooming Bank, that is a side-loaded that you'd taken a picture of. It's a side-loaded garage, but it's in front of the house. Okay. And in a case such as that, I would think that we would want the 9-foot limit. I think further, maybe it was the second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, that
This
one.
is the one. Okay.
Yeah. So in a case such as this, where the garage is attached and in front of the home, I would think that the 9-foot restrictions might be appropriate.
I agree.
Whereas the other one, which was detached and was behind the house.
Sure.
Then agree 18, makes sense.
Okay.
I can get behind that, that's fine. I think the purpose is that if it's visible from the street.
And this one, when you're driving up the street, I mean, one such as this, where it's in front of the house, when you're driving up the street,
Sure.
Because
that's what you're looking at.
is that a 9-foot garage right
I
there?
believe it's
Ish.
18.
It was 18.
Yeah. If that's the general consensus of the commission, if the rule of thumb is if the doors are visible from the street, they should be limited to 9 feet in width. I think it's easy to fill the rest of this out We would maintain these first two lines as 9 feet. We would define and specify that side-loaded that are visible, from the street are limited to 9 feet wide. And then, rear-loaded, attached rear-loaded, alley wouldn't require, and again,
I would
They're
propose, excuse me for interrupting, but
please,
I
please.
would propose that an alley is not a street or a well-traveled road, so I don't see the necessity to have the restriction of 9 feet on any alley-facing garage.
I agree with that.
Agreed.
I suspect that with our new definition, this recommendation may have been different in the 2018 Commission's recommendations.
And just to clarify, when we say it's the door, but they could still have a column and they could still have two 9-foot doors, we're just saying you can't have one 18-foot door. Okay.
Now, for detached front-loaded garages that are behind the primary structure but that are still visible from the street, should the doors be limited to 9 feet, or would 18 feet be acceptable?
I think for the detached garages, I'm less comfortable with the idea of moving to 9 feet, only because those are limited in size by, several other parts of the ordinance. The size of the garage itself. And so if we're forcing the garage to be wider to accommodate additional garage doors for that, to let them put that column between the two, we're making the garage maybe bigger than the homeowner would even want. So I mean, personally, I think 18 feet for the detached garages is okay.
I also
I
feel
agree.
like that's what we're trying to encourage, right? Is this kind of detached garage toward the back. So to put an additional restriction on it seems counterproductive.
Yeah.
So on an interior lot, not a corner lot, a front-loaded garage behind the primary structure would be allowed to have an 18-foot door. If we had an example of the front-loaded garage on a corner lot that we looked at, let me see if I can flip through here somewhat quickly. So that is sort of behind the primary structure. In this case, would you want the doors to be limited to 18? So should there be an exception for corner lots, again, with a front-loaded garage is my question.
Excuse me, where is the front door of that house?
It is around the corner right here. So this would be like the side of the house.
So that the garage arguably could be a side-loaded garage then, right?
So I think you can approach it in two ways. The way that I was trying to do it, which is, I think without being, I tried to write the definitions two ways. The way that I found was easiest was that to define front-loaded as loading straight directly from the street, whether it is an interior lot or a corner lot. And then trying to define whether this would be rear-loaded because it's behind the house or whether this is the side of the house is what became very difficult to define. So in my definition, this would be a front-loaded detached garage on a corner lot.
Yeah, in this case, I think, again, by trying to reduce the visual bulk of the garage doors, we're again forcing the actual bulk of the garage to be a bit bigger. So I don't know that I would want to have the 9-foot restriction in this case.
I agree. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about forcing the overall structure to be bigger.
That makes your definitions all the more harder, I would think, to come up with. I would agree that you don't want to encourage a larger garage structure.
So when parsing the design requirements, if we make changes to them, I think within this table, I think you could add, for example, right here is the garage that we're looking at. It's detached, it's front-loaded, it's beside or behind the primary structure on a corner lot. So you can specify, instead of 9 feet, this would be 18, based on your direction.
I would like to suggest that if it is beside, it should be 9 feet. And if it's behind, it can be 18 feet.
Okay. And the orientation of behind versus beside would be based on the orientation of the front door?
That's where you got hung up when you were doing this?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where, I think I have a diagram of a corner lot in one of my, diagrams here. Let me see if I can find it.
Like the one that you were showing, that is behind.
It is.
So
we
no,
have-
not the front door, but the street that the garage entrance is off of.
So this might be helpful.
I
I'm not
think.
sure if it is. But since this doesn't have a front door orientation,
Yeah.
if the front door is here, it would be beside the house. If the front door is here, it would be behind the house, correct?
I guess.
Or not?
So I'm defining it as the entrance from which the garage, the street from which the garage gains its access is what defines it as behind or beside. So in this case, it is beside the house. And if we moved it toward the right, so that it was behind the house, further right, so it would be fully behind the house. Right there. Because it's fully behind the, let's say, the face that is perpendicular to the street from which the vehicular access is gained.
So if the vehicular access is gained here,
Right.
and the garage is past this point,
Right. I
it
feel
has to be completely, to be behind the house, it would have to be clear the entire length of the house.
Correct.
And be located here,
yes,
to be considered behind the house. Okay. Regardless of the orientation of the front door.
correct.
Okay, understood.
And perhaps we might say that if the face of the garage is, whatever, within 10, 20, 30, some number, within that area, it would be 9-foot doors
Okay.
up behind it. It's just that it's very visible from the street when it's
It is.
immediately adjacent to the building like that.
Would, we can always use, or explore the idea of using that 40-foot measurement that we use for fences, that kind of visual break in public, kind of visual public space versus visual private space.
Yeah.
So for example, if this garage were 40 feet back from this point of the house, then if it's located here, and the garage doors could be 18 feet wide, versus if it's closer to the street, that provides vehicular access, then 40 feet past the point of the foundation, it could be 9 feet wide.
And I think that's a good dimension to use because we're already using it elsewhere for the same purpose.
Okay.
So that makes sense.
Yep, I like that consistency.
I like that too.
So then the idea is that the garage is far enough from the street that it doesn't become a visible eyesore? Okay. I think it's good to be consistent.
Okay, just taking a look at our table here. We would want to, I would assume, maintain these two existing measurements of 9 feet for both our attached front-loaded garages, either for standard or corner lot. Now, if it's attached front-loaded on a corner lot, if it's back 40 feet, do we want to make an exception? If it's, I can't off the top of my head think of a house that would meet that requirement.
Because that's my house example, right?
Okay,
Then that would be,
let's see.
has to be a big lot,
It would be a big lot, I think. Let me pull up.
or wide.
Okay. So this is attached front-loaded corner lot, which I think is the I think what we were looking at. Yep, attached front-loaded corner lot. And we want to start that measurement at the foundation of the house, not at the street. Okay. So in this case, if you had a double garage, 2 9-foot doors instead of one 18-foot door, I think, unless you move the garage back.
Which would put it in my neighbor's yard. That's what I'm saying, is like,
Yeah. Okay.
my flowers look so good there, guys. That is not a current picture.
Okay, so I think I have direction, and do we have consensus on the 40 feet for front-loaded, for corner lots, attached or
Yes.
detached?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And side-loaded, if it's visible from the street, that would be 9 feet, and so I can parse that in the definition. Rear-loaded, that would be, again, attached on the back of the house.
Yeah.
Okay, no change there. Alley loaded, Commissioner Brahm expressed an interest in allowing 18 feet.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Detached front loaded behind the primary structure. I heard 18 feet was what you'd like to keep, is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay. And that's a standard lot. I got direction on the corner lot. Or one detached side loaded garage. We have one example of that. I don't know if we want to allow 18 feet or limit that. That'll be based on visibility because it's side loaded, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
So keep it in.
So based on visibility for that, I would assume that behind the primary structure would be less visible from the house. You had mentioned in front of the primary structure, whereas you're concerned about side loaded garages.
Right.
Okay. And then again, an alley loaded garage, we don't need to worry about okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Correct.
Can make those changes. Okay. So we had 2 design standards for front-loaded garages in the existing code, and the commission recommended combining those into one standard. So I'll move over to, and this is strategic landscaping. Okay, so this is one of the design standards that we replaced this new statement with. So that's removed and replaced with this standard. And the second one is here. So these two are
Combined.
combined. Sorry. Do you have any concerns about the definition?
I think that looks good.
Yes, looks good.
Okay. 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 Setbacks for front-loaded garages. So the current code again states that attached front-loaded garages can't protrude beyond the front building line more than 5 feet. The commission expressed support for requiring that front-loaded garages be set back 5 feet from the front of the house. So with that change, this language is removed and this language is added. With an additional statement that in any existing garages that don't meet the standard as of the date of the adoption of the ordinance are subject to the standards for non-conforming structures, I think which we discussed during the last meeting. I think I included, yeah. So that would be the required design, with this being the entry to the garage. And you can see it's set back a 5 feet minimum from the front facade of the house. Okay. Any concerns about that section?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So regarding design standards, the commission expressed support for making design standards consistent while recognizing that the standards for detached garages behind homes on interior lots may not need to be as stringent for those that are visible from the street. Again, village staff would determine if design standards are met if they're requirements. And the applicant could appeal staff's decision to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So taking a look at those changes. So this would be a requirement for all residential garages, that the architecture and design garages built after the date of the adoption of the ordinance would be consistent with the architecture and design of the principal building. This is language that we discussed during the last meeting. And then I added a sentence just to add clarity that garages are not required to be made of the same materials as the principal building on the property. Just so that it's clear that if you had a brick house and you didn't want to build a brick garage, you don't have to, as long as it's consistent in design.
Good.
Okay. And we did remove a couple of design requirements because we replaced them with our consistency language.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to driveway width standards. This was one of the remaining items that I think would benefit from some clarity about our new definitions. So again, I'm not sure that there are houses where there is a driveway beside the house that's an interior lot. I think that more appropriately affects corner lots. So I guess the question is, here are the standards for a front-loaded garage. Basically, as the driveway leaves the street and approaches the house, it can be a maximum of 10 feet wide. It can widen to be as wide as the garage within 20 feet of the face of the garage, but it has to narrow down back to 10 feet within 30 feet of the face of the garage. The question is, do you want to maintain this standard for driveway dimensions for garages on corner lots, or do you want to make them more stringent? Perhaps to limit, to limit this distance instead of being 20 feet wide to being 15 feet wide. That was the original 2018 amendment suggestion.
It's 15.
I think most corner lots, like in the example, have a pretty visible garage that's pretty close to the street. So that's, I think, more pavement, and I think the idea was to reduce that pavement visibility.
I'm sorry, Ann, which dimension would we be reducing to 15 feet?
This dimension here.
Okay, so,
So instead of this being 20 feet wide, this would be 15 feet wide.
I think it would be, I think it could cause some issues with trying to get into, with maneuverability. So I think that 20-foot length is probably necessary. But I would also say that where it meets the street, it shouldn't be more than maybe 20 feet,
We've got,
right?
yes, we have standards for that. So there are some garages that are extremely close to the street
Yeah.
that would never be able to narrow down. But the standard is within that 20 feet, you start to narrow down, and then it should be within the street 10 feet wide with 4-foot radii on either side, and that's the limitation.
yeah, I think I would be inclined to leave it at 20 feet, just, to allow for a full car length to come out of the garage before you need to start angling.
Yeah, my concern with corner lots is you're potentially on two more well-traveled streets, and maybe for safety reasons, it's just better to have a wider, you don't want to narrow down that driveway too quickly. Without visually seeing every single corner house to see, I hesitate to agree to shorten that, the driveway.
I agree.
Okay. Moving on to our last topic where I'm requesting your direction is on bonus density. So we discussed this during the last meeting and ran some numbers, and I included some additional numbers, and hopefully this is clarifying. So I looked at average lot sizes instead of minimum lot sizes for each district, and then average building sizes, and then and then added a couple of other options. So for each of our zoning districts, we have R1AA, which are our largest lots, R1A, many lots in the R1A district, and then moving on down to R2, which is single family with some single family and then duplexes. So those are the two main types of development in the R2 district. But they're a little bit different types of lot and lot sizes. And then lots R3, again, have single family and duplexes, and then R4. And unfortunately, with R4, there are so few single family uses that there's no real meaningful data that I can collect on that. But taking a look at that, you've got your maximum building coverage is 30% for all lots. I do have the minimum lot size in there, so you can see it decreases as you go through the zoning districts. And now here, the average lot size. So you've got your minimums, but these are the average that I found. And then the average building coverage on an average lot. So, for example, in the R1AA district, the average lot size, while they vary greatly, is about 16,460 square feet. And for an average lot coverage, it's about 18%. So quite a bit below the 30% that's permitted. Keeping in mind that there's some variation in those numbers when you get to the other sides of the scale. In R1AA district, our largest zoning district, the average lot size is about 2,271 square feet larger than the minimum lot size. So you've got 9,300 square feet, a little bit less. And the average building coverage is a little less than 2,000 square feet. So 21% of the allowable building coverage. So they've still got room, most of them. And then unsurprisingly, as you move down in lot size, from R2 to R3 to R4, you have basically most properties at or pretty near the maximum building coverage, who would actually might be interested, I think, more interested in bonus building coverage. So this includes allowable building coverage on that size. You can compare it to the average and see kind of where those are. And then I think we started with, the last time looked at 400 square feet, because that was one of the recommendations of the 2018 amendment. Now they said, in the 2018 amendments, they said their bonus density was the area of the new garage shall be excluded from the building coverage in the following situations. Now, new garage, 480 square feet, seems about average from what I've seen come in for a two-car garage. So it would be limited to single-family houses only. So for new single-family dwelling units, the detached garage in a rear yard or a rear-loaded attached garage. So that would be the one situation where you could have the bonus density. They suggested if an existing single-family dwelling unit is being remodeled and a detached garage is constructed in the rear yard, or there's a rear-loaded attached garage, in lieu of an existing attached front-loaded garage. You know, in the case, I guess, that someone removes a garage and rearranges that's be a fairly significant remodeling. And then the third case is where someone didn't have a garage, and then they added one and put it in the rear yard, and in that case, the bonus was limited to 400 square feet. So those are the three categories where previously bonus density was recommended. And kind of broadening that, I just took a look at all the zoning districts and then looked at what it would look like if you added 200 square feet, 400 square feet, 5% additional building coverage, or 10% additional building coverage, to see if any of these numbers would be something that you would want to recommend. Because R1AA seems less likely to take advantage of the additional building coverage, and that's interesting, but maybe not as relevant as if we move to R1A and then further on down, especially the R2 and R3, I think, districts. And I think as a reference point, I included the average size of a new two-car garage, 480 square feet. The average size of a new bedroom is 132 square feet, and a new bathroom is 50. So if you wanted to move, and let's just assume this is a single-story dwelling, it could be 2 stories easily. But if you had a single-story dwelling and you wanted to add, go from if you had room for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and you wanted to move to a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, you'd be theoretically around 200 square feet. Now, depends on everyone's preference and size and design and all those things. So there's a lot of variables that we can't necessarily know about in making that decision. But if you look at a zoning district like single family, which is what the commission recommended in 2018, is applying it to single family lots in the R2 district, where for the most part, folks are maximizing the size of building on their property. Adding 200 square feet would allow them to have that addition to the house. You could also consider a 5% bonus, which would be 275 square feet, and variations thereof. So for a visual reference, I modified these slightly from the last time that we took a look at them. So taking a look at, here's an example property in the R1 AA district. So again, one of our large lots. This property would have the maximum building coverage if the house were the area outlined in black and the garage were the area in gray. It's still about 500 square feet below the impervious surface coverage. So they could add, while meeting the impervious surface coverage, these 2 areas, each of these represents 200 square feet. So if you added a 400 square foot bonus, they could still meet their impervious surface coverage, and that's approximately what the lot would like with that amount of building coverage. Moving down to our example in the R1A district, the same principle applies. However, this property, and part of it is due to the layout of this property, most folks don't have this kind of excessive driveway, but they are currently with the house outlined in black, the gray garage, and the driveway as it is, they are over their impervious surface coverage. So adding the 200 square feet here would further put them over the impervious surface coverage. And then moving to a property in the R2 district, since many of the properties in the R2 and R3 district are about this size, this is roughly applicable for those properties. So this property with this configuration, the black box represents the house, the gray box representing the garage. It does have the maximum amount of impervious surface allowed, and then adding this 200 square feet and then another 200 square feet would kind of result in this as an option. So in the smaller lots, it would be difficult, I think, to add a full 400 square feet while meeting the impervious surface coverage standards for those lots. I think they could definitely benefit by creating a semi-pervious surface or driveway on the property, but not probably to the extent that they're going to be able to offset the entire 400 square feet if they use that. Now, if you want to allow 200 square feet, they could always go vertical. We're just talking about building footprint, not total square footage of the house.
Right.
So that's a consideration. But I wanted to present these and get kind of your feedback and see if you would recommend bonus coverage to encourage folks who are redeveloping their properties in a significant way to have a detached garage in the rear of the property, which is what the 2018 amendments were trying to propose. And then I had a series of questions for you. So basically, should you use bonus coverage? And then if you do, should it apply to these projects? Should it be used limited to different types of uses, different types of properties, interior versus corner lots, specific zoning districts, specific sizes of lots, and then what amount is appropriate, and then should impervious surface coverage increase also be included in that? So So I know that's a lot of questions, but
Anyone have anything before I jump in? No, go ahead.
Feel free.
Okay. Yeah, so having had some time to think about these, I think I'm generally okay with the amendments as proposed in 2018, provided that we don't automatically give a bonus for impervious surface coverage. I don't want to necessarily tilt someone in the direction of creating drainage issues on a property, particularly since we just made recommendations for how you can use pervious surfaces to address these things on your property. So I think, yeah, if that comes up in the future, that should be treated as a variation rather than an automatic.
So would you be against bonus space or allowing, you'd be okay with?
Yeah, allowing the bonuses, encouraging that, but just, when someone does bump up against the impervious surface limitation, then they would need to request a variation for that.
Yeah, that's understood. I think that that's reasonable.
I guess I lost us a second. The 2018, they didn't recommend all 4 of these ideas, right? Are we trying to decide which one of the 4? 200, 400, 5%, 10%?
oh, no. I was putting numbers out there
Just
just
so-
for your reference.
I see, I
Just
see, I see.
Yep.
Okay.
I started
Just
with
like-
400 during the last meeting and thought, well, maybe something smaller or maybe a percentage base might work.
Okay,
So those are
okay.
just food for thought.
I see, thank you.
Sure.
I was like, 10% seems like a lot. Will you put your questions back up?
Yes,
Sorry
absolutely.
about this. I guess I could scroll.
I'm a bit torn because I feel like, R1AA and R1A already aren't using their building coverage, so that bonus is kind of ineffective. I mean, for them, and the people who really could use it are almost automatically bumping up against the impervious, right? So I'm almost leaning toward not a bonus.
I would argue that if the intention is to encourage garages not on the street, for those properties who do have the option where they're not bumping up against the impervious, I would like to have that bonus available to them.
I, obviously don't have the numbers to back it up, but I would imagine that probably the newer houses that this is geared toward, up to new construction, are probably using a greater percentage of the lot than the existing homes.
Yeah.
So in those cases, it might be a bit more of an incentive.
We also have a lot of odd-shaped lots in the community, and particularly if you're, if it's new construction, if you're to encourage builders to perhaps come in and make better use of certain lots, encouraging them to put the garage in the back of the lot with bonus areas or bonus space, I think would be a good thing to do.
And I suppose if they're doing that much work, they can put in some semi-pervious
Correct.
That would be nice.
things to make up for it, so I'm amenable.
So, but how much, I guess is the question.
And just as a reminder, you can see here, these are the questions, but the original 2018 amendments proposed deducting the size of the garage, or allowing the size of the garage to be your bonus. As a reminder, you can have, an accessory building can be up to 800 square feet in size.
I would rather not reward necessarily bigger garages, right? That's kind of
Yes.
effectively what you're doing by that, doing
Yeah, maybe
that, so. I-
capping it.
Yeah. I think the 400 seems reasonable.
Okay.
The average two-car garage is 480?
I think 480.
480? Can we say 480?
Which would encourage people to build their garage exactly the same size that their bonus would be.
Yeah, I guess I don't necessarily see any reason to tie the two things together, but the size of the garage with the
Mhm.
bonus space. But,
Yeah, that makes sense.
right, but, I mean, 480 doesn't seem unreasonable either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of a cap, whether that's 400 or 480. I can go either way.
Looking at the single family with the 400, the R1A, no, the R2,
Two.
yeah, thank you,
R2,
yeah,
single family?
yeah. The visual
Oh,
that you
sure.
have with the bonus space, because that's 400. With the blue and yellow combined is 400.
Those combined is 400.
Yeah.
And you said that this particular diagram, they exceed their impervious surface?
They're without the addition, without the blue and orange, with this house footprint, with this garage footprint, and this pavement, they're at the maximum allowed. Now, in the R2 and R3 and R4 districts, you can have a greater percentage of impervious surface, recognizing that they're smaller lots, so it's 60%, I think. So in R1AA, it's 45, R1A, it's 50, and then it goes up to 60%. So it looks like a lot because it's a greater percentage of the lot. So in this specific example, adding the orange and blue squares would require finding another 400 square feet of impervious surface, either by, reinstalling this as a semi-permeable surface, removing some of this pavement, even narrowing this down. So could be difficult.
And then another 80 feet would be approximately half the width of the blue area.
That's correct, because each of
Right.
these boxes are 200 square feet. That's correct.
And if it was 2 stories, it would really be adding double that.
That's correct.
I don't know. 400 seems like a lot to me on that lot. But
I'm not going to die on the 80 feet hill, so.
that's fair. That's fair.
Would we word it as being, they get the bonus for the size of the garage up to 400 square feet in case someone does come in with a 1 car or 1.5 car or something smaller that they want to put up? Don't want to necessarily give them more area.
Than they were thinking.
Maybe. Again, we get back to, does it really need to be tied to the size of the structure?
And are we encouraging bigger
Houses.
garages
Right,
by doing that?
right.
But as long as there's the impervious surface requirement, they can't, they may have 480 feet or whatever, but they can't necessarily use it
Mhm.
because of the other restrictions.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going back to the idea that we don't need to tie the size of the bonus to the size of the garage, because what we're trying to do here is to encourage the detached garage in the first place.
Are we all in agreement that offering bonus space is a good thing? Are we just
I think so.
deciding on how much,
I
the
think
value?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are the examples provided in the 2018 amendments, the examples that you'd like to stick with? Or the instances where you could use, where the bonus density would apply?
Yeah, I like those examples, and I'm okay with sticking with 400 square feet, I think.
I'm fine with the examples, and there's a very little difference between 400 and 480. And I can certainly understand why they don't necessarily need to be tied together. Is it necessary to have language added that, 400 square feet of bonus space, as long as it doesn't interfere with impervious surface? Or is the fact that it's somewhere else in the code sufficient?
I would say the fact that it's in the code is sufficient.
Okay.
If these are acceptable, I just want to make sure that we're clear. So all of these are for single-family uses. Is that something that you're in agreement with?
Yes.
Okay. And there's no, now if let's see, if it's do we want to make any restrictions or limitations for corner lots? For where the garage is located if it's a corner lot? So, for example, if we have a new construction, and we're encouraging a detached garage, does it need to be set back a certain amount from the street, or set back a certain amount based on the foundation of the house? Or, theoretically, if they built the garage here, that would be acceptable. As long as it meets the standards in the zoning code for garages, we're comfortable with the location for a corner lot. Is that correct?
What were the restrictions or the conditions for this bonus?
It's for new construction.
Yeah,
So if you had new construction, single-family dwelling, detached garages in the rear yard or rear loaded attached. So I take rear yard to mean behind the primary structure.
right.
And
Oh, and you're calling that behind the primary structure.
I am,
Yes.
in my mind,
That's
but I'm happy
right.
to be directed otherwise. But in my mind, this is behind the primary structure. So if,
I guess I would
If it
want it
needs to
to
be-
only apply to a garage that is set back 40 feet from the roadway or from the face of the building.
so this distance would need to be 40 feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that works with what we
Good.
talked about earlier.
Okay. In that case, should this be limited to certain zoning districts?
I would say any single family would be okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I think any single family
I agree.
house would be okay.
And size of lots, it should be applied to any size lot.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I believe you gave me direction of 400 square feet and not to include impervious surface coverage increase. Okay.
All right, is there
Okay.
any more information you need from us?
That's wonderful information. I greatly appreciate your direction. And just as a next step, I hope you all can attend the February meeting. We'll have a public hearing on the amendments. I'll give an update to the village board at their next meeting and get any additional direction from them, come back to you with the amendments. We'll take them to the Preservation Commission, and then hopefully an ordinance to the village board.
Great. Thank you as always, Anne.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any information to share? All right. In that case, our next meeting will be on February 26th. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.